questions. If you feel your questions have been asked before, you can upvote an existing question. So I can make sure your questions get answered by the panel. You can follow us on Twitter using the handle ITI Webinar Series. And finally, yes, you can look forward to our weekly webinar. We go live every Thursday, 3:30 p.m. Hong Kong, Singapore, 6:30 p.m. Australia, 7:30 a.m. in the UK. Brilliant. So today's session, hold on. Slides. Wow. Hold on. Drag slides. Bear with me for a second.
It's the joys of technology, Arun, isn't it?
It is.
Rita can sing a song while we wait if you like.
Love to do that.
Our topic today is why are partnerships the future of customer service, right? And to kind of dig in deeper, we have an amazing panel, some really, really smart people. We have James from QBE, we have Rita from Insurtech Australia. So why don't we do a quite quick round of introductions? My name's Arun, by the way. I'll be your moderator. But Rita, why don't you kick off? Give us a quick introduction while I set this lovely thing up.
Sure.
Rita?
Just had to go off mute. Yes, I'm here. Hello, everyone, and welcome from wherever you are, either tonight or potentially it may be morning for you, wherever you are. As Arun said, I'm Rita Yates. I'm the CEO of Insurtech Australia, and I was also one of the co-founders back in 2017 when we first formed, essentially as an industry organisation to support the growth of Insurtech here in Australia, but also beyond. So we are a member-based organisation. We have a bunch of members who are Insurtech startups and scale-ups, and then we also have a number of corporate partners that come from the insurance landscape. I have a background in insurance and financial services, but I've also worked in health and not-for-profit sectors, and prior to this role actually worked in fintech more broadly for Stone & Chalk, which is Asia Pacific's largest fintech hub. So that's me. Back to you, Arun.
Thanks, Rita. James, you go next.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So James Orchard, I'm the CEO of QBE Ventures. So QBE Ventures is the venture investment and development arm of QBE. I've only been in this role for about 4 or 5 months, really coming in to, I guess, help take it to the next level. We started about 3 years ago, really trying to sort of lift our capability in investments and establish a partnering and venture development capability. So hugely excited by the challenge that awaits. Prior to this role, I had 5 years at IAG where I was the executive general manager for innovation for the group.
Brilliant. Thanks, James. And we have Chris finally online with us. Thank you, Chris, for joining. Why don't you give us a quick introduction?
Thanks for the call out, and thanks for having me. So I'm the technology guy. I can't use the technology. But Chris Bailey's my name. I'm co-founder and chief innovation officer for Genius, which is an insurtech. From the days before insurtech was a phrase that had been coined. So we started in 2004, and we have a global operation. Our reason to be is to enable the world's largest online businesses to sell or embed insurance, and that's what we've been doing since day dot. So thank you, Arun, and great to see you again, James and Rita.
Excellent. Let's get on with it. So we've kind of broken the topic into three areas. So the first one is understanding the current state of customer service, right? So let's start with you, Rita. In your view, what is the current state of CS, if I may?
In insurance, yeah. So I think that we'd probably all agree that insurance is, generally speaking, a fair way behind a lot of other industries, particularly those that have already experienced quite significant disruption, like the retail industry, as an example. And in reality, customer expectations and changing customer expectations have actually been one of the main drivers of what we would call the Insurtech revolution, with the other main driver being the accessibility of technology. So we know that customer expectations have changed a lot over the last 5 to 10 years. Everyone carries a mobile phone around and expects that essentially that piece of equipment can do everything for them, no matter what they are trying to do. Their expectations are that services are 24/7, that they can have instant responses to their questions, and certainly lots of digital options for what they're trying to achieve. So I think that COVID has also driven those expectations even further. In that, when we look at insurance specifically, customers are wanting things like insurance that's actually relevant to their lives, so that can be changed and quite flexible. When you think about things like car insurance and those that haven't been using their cars through the COVID lockdown periods, they're looking for alternate models that match what they receive from other industries, like subscription models, pay-as-you-go, monthly options. And a lot of the time, those options are just not available to them through the more traditional channels. I guess whilst customer experience has come a fair way in insurance, there's still quite a long way to go. It actually shocked me this February. I think Chris knows this, that I actually had to put a claim in for our home when a tree fell through the roof of our house, and was really shocked at the experience that I received, which was certainly not meeting my expectations. And at one point I was trying to find out where my claim was at, and couldn't get through on the phone. So I emailed them and had a response that came back that said, we'll get back to you within 10 days, which is pretty shocking when you've got a hole in the roof. So, I read this report by IBM recently that found that 42% of consumers still don't fully trust the insurance industry, which I think is certainly a major issue, and that most consumers tend to stay with their insurer not because it's a great experience, but simply because they have a lack of options. And I think that's a real issue. Ultimately, this all relates back to the, impression that consumers have of the industry and the experience that they have. And certainly adding a much more positive experience and delightful experiences will go a long way, I think, to changing that 42% figure.
Absolutely. And trust is such an important factor when it comes to, putting your, understanding the brand's perception, or, how well is the insurer doing, right? So thinking about performance as an insurer, James, in your view, why do you think insurance as an industry has been lagging behind some of the other industries in customer service?
Yeah, and look, to be honest, I think this could be a webinar topic just in itself, right? We could dedicate the next 45 minutes just to this. And look, from a personal perspective, having been involved in the insurance industry for about 10 years and in the innovation side of it most recently, it still sucks that this is a topic, right? In webinars, it's not the other way around. But look, I think, it's fair to say, look, in my opinion, there has been a chronic underinvestment over a very extended period of time by insurance companies to improve their customer experience, right? And in my view as well, I think insurers still have a long way to go. There is a lot of talk around insurers wanting to becoming customer-centric, putting the customer at the heart of everything they do. But I still see a big disconnection between what they're saying, what we're saying, and actually what we're doing. And I think when I talk about investment, I'm talking about investments in not only the technologies, and bring in emerging technologies to try and improve that customer experience, or a better digital experience. But even just the processes and the right processes, the right governance, the right models that allow insurers or provide, greater ability for insurers to take new things to customers. And that's just sort of been quite consistent, I think, for some time. And if we think about why we haven't done that, why we haven't invested in that, there's a couple of reasons. First of all, we haven't really needed to. For so long the industry's been somewhat protected. It's been it's very complex. It's very regulated. And at the end of the day, for the most part of P&C, we're selling protection for an asset. So everything that we want to know to offer that service, we just need to know about the asset, right? Its type, its use, its value, right? And that pretty much goes into the product that we sell. So we've never really had to, we've never invested in understanding the customer and understanding the behaviors, their needs, their wants, their desires. And as such, we have no ability, or very limited ability, to identify that proactively and then try and address that, right? Especially as some of the other organizations that have had, like in hospitality and transport, where it's all about the customer, right? We just haven't had to do that. And even if I have a look now around how big insurance companies work, from a mindset perspective, while they want to change and they recognize they need to change, right? They recognize that customers want simplicity, they want transparency, they want that trust that Rita mentioned. The way they go about solving that is to build big transformation programs that are effectively, inwardly focused to, simplify systems, right? It's not outwardly focused. It tends to be very biased towards, expense reduction, and these sort of projects over time become so, I guess, overburdened with complexity that eventually they just stop and we start again somewhere else, right? And Rita was talking about, like, a really good example of that from that legacy mindset is, I also had a claim recently, and it wasn't with QBE, I can say, but I had the same thing where the actual registration of the claim, right, the actual digital experience was phenomenal. Like, it was absolutely phenomenal. I lodged the claim all on my phone, went straight through. It was allocated to a repairer the next day, and I dropped the car off. I didn't have to speak to anyone. There were no handoffs. It was brilliant. Then I handed the car over to get repaired, and that's when it all went downhill. So they sort of send text messages, very old school technology. They send text messages to try and keep you abreast of the process of the claim. But all I was getting was text messages the day before I was due to pick the car up to say that the car is going to take another week to fix. And what was originally sort of a 7-day fix was a 7-week fix. And really they sort of relied on technology, but all they were using it to do was to tell me that the repair was going to be delayed. And, then you have to ring them up and you hand it off to different people, and they end up just connecting you to the repairer. And sort of then it all goes backwards. So that sort of real legacy mindset, I think, with how they approach these things, and digital is great, but really they sort of have to think beyond that, right? And have this model where they're constantly iterating and not just sort of not doing one-off pieces.
But isn't someone up in the chain keeping the CXO or the CMO accountable for improving customer experience in terms of service? Like, there's an NPS score that should be part and parcel of KPIs, I would presume, or CXI. So isn't that happening to the extent that it's happening in other industries?
I can't comment too much on other industries because I've been so focused on insurance for so long, or certainly most recently. One of the things I do find is that there is certainly even an internal disconnect between those who are accountable for the technology side of things and the planning side of things, and those accountable for delivery to the customer, right? And so often what you're experiencing on the front line, there are limited mechanisms for feeding that back up the chain. And if it does, then implementing change is difficult. And as I said, it becomes overburdened sometimes with complexity. It comes overburdened with sort of having to keep a lot of stakeholders across that and satisfied in order to get the project done. And what starts out as something that's relatively quick and easy is sort of turned into something that just becomes too difficult, right? And so I think one of the companies that I worked previously, there was actually a disconnect between accountabilities for people building the customer experience and those who had to deliver the NPS. So it was sort of in disparate parts of the organization. And so again, you don't have that alignment between, the incentive model there.
Got it. Chris, not sure if you can hear us because your video is probably not connected correctly, but if you can hear us, want to get your views on, insurers have been able to, most insurers I know have a 24/7 chatbot service to engage customer queries. It can then the back end create the right tickets, etc., in their Salesforce, CRM, etc. Right. So, do you think it has had some success in improving customer experience? Chris? If not, Rita, would you mind taking that?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to take it. Before I do, though, I just wanted to make a quick comment, which was off the back of a couple of things that James was saying. I think one thing that has happened during COVID that we have seen is that there has been sort of pockets of, I guess, technology implementation that have happened very, very quickly because they have had to. So that element of, insurers kind of sitting back and not feeling like they actually really need to change very significantly because of a whole bunch of reasons. There have been pockets where COVID has actually pushed that along really quickly. And so one place that we have seen that happen in Australia, for example, is virtual inspection technology that has been able to be very quickly implemented by some insurers, whereas they had been having discussions with insurtechs that provide this technology for quite some time beforehand and had not implemented it because they hadn't needed to. And certainly that then relates back to the customer experience or the experience that the customer has throughout that process. So I thought I'd just give that as a bit of an example. But then back to your current question, which is about the 24/7 customer service using chatbots catching on with customers. I think it is. I think it's being done, across different insurers and brokers, for that matter, to different degrees in terms of the success that it is having, and across different lines of insurance as well. It's being done to quite different degrees. So I think that it's not yet a sort of like a modus operandi for consumers to understand that they can use that as an option. It's, as I said, it's more effective in some areas than others. But I think ultimately it's a necessity that will have to be implemented for all insurers across all lines of insurance, because if you look at many other industries, that's simply just a part of their service offering, the 24/7 offering that they have.
Brilliant. That's agree with you, Rita. Kind of looking at the second stage of our discussion, which is how are partnerships benefiting both, right, insurance and insurtech industry. So in your mind, just for Rita, what are insurtech firms offering to insurers which can help them leapfrog ahead of competitors?
So I mean, you can find solutions across every aspect of the insurance value chain. So pretty much every pain point on the insurance value chain, there's a tech solution out there that is accessible, that as an insurer or a broker, you can be working with. So that starts all the way from certainly distribution. And I wish Chris was on the line and able to be heard, because he'd be able to speak quite a lot about what they're doing in this space in terms of alternate distribution models as an example, and alternate, I guess, partners that they're working with in terms of distributing insurance online. All the way, and I guess along that process, you've got back-end process improvement where there are insurtech solutions operating. You have new propositions, brand new propositions for customers. Like, for example, we have a couple of insurtechs working to provide gig economy insurance specifically. And then, all the way down to the claims experience, which is, quite a big focus at the moment for insurtech organisations, because it is the one which is almost like the make or break for consumers, as well as businesses. So commercial insurance as well. Once you get to that point of claim, if it's a good experience, that will leave a good impression with your insurer. If it's a bad experience, like mine was, and mine was even worse than yours, James, then that's often the situation where an insurer will lose a customer. So there are some great new platforms from a claims perspective to be able to provide much more transparency to consumers, much faster processing, and just a much overall greater and better experience.
Absolutely. And James, from your point of view, does that align with what insurers seek from a partnership with insurtech firms?
Yeah, very much so. So, if I think about our role in the world, so QBE Ventures takes this role where we're sitting in between, two entities, right? So the QBE group and the insurtech community and the startup community, and in effect, these two entities are diametrically opposed, right? In pretty much everything, apart from maybe a bit of ambition. But even then, ways of working, decision making, mindset a lot of the time. And so we sort of have to play this key role around bringing them together. And in the sense of what we look for in a partnership, I mean, really, it's a lot of things, right? And Insurtech is certainly being able to fill this gap, both technically, and on the cultural side. So, we're after access to talent, we're after creativity, we want, obviously access to digital, technology, IP, digital nous, diversity of thought. And so, sort of, our model is really about. QBE Ventures perspective, our model is really about not just a partnership, but it's really about a collaboration, right? So it's being entwined a lot more in terms of how you work together and how you co-create. So, sort of with that in mind, actually, the first thing that we look for as an insurer in a partnership is cultural and strategic alignment, right? So, at the end of the day, the biggest thing that we value, that we place value on in a partner is the ability to sort of share values, the ability to sort of understand each other, to listen to each other, to work together in a way that over time builds trust. Similar to customer experience and customers wanting trust, the most effective partnerships and what we're looking for are those parties who come to ask questions, right? That they're curious, and they want to work together to sort of solve that common problem, right? So that's sort of a big thing that we look for in a partnership, and a big thing that any insurtech that comes to work with us, even if it's just for a distribution play or for capacity, that sort of shared ambition, that shared cultural alignment is super key for what we do. I think another point that's sort of somewhat related to that then is around mindset, right? So how does the insurtech, how do our partners, how do they challenge convention? How do they think outside of the box? Are they very much sort of assuming that the product that they have developed is the only one that exists? They are sort of Elon Musk, if you like, or someone, Jeff Bezos, and they're sort of coming into this knowing everything, and that they are the savior. And quite often than not, they tend to have products that are sort of black boxed up. They don't share, and then all of a sudden that starts to breed this sort of mindset that's not quite aligned with how we like to work, and you don't sort of build that trust, right? And likewise, sometimes the insurers come thinking that this is just a digital fluff, and there's nothing there, and we can build it ourselves, right? So we play this sort of really sort of key role in trying to balance that. And so I think the final thing that we really look for in a partnership is an understanding from the startup that we're not going to work together to solve the world's problems overnight, right? So we're really looking at sort of a long-term piece there, and appetite over the long term, the ability to sort of experiment and iterate, to not just do death by pilot, right? We're not up for that, but understanding that we want to sort of set a clear long-term roadmap, and we build on our successes over time, right? And with that comes we'll need a certain amount of patience. The partner will need a certain amount of resilience, and we sort of need to see that through. And the most successful partnerships that we've had are just that, right? And I think our one recently with safety culture was probably a really good example, where you had two diametrically opposed organizations coming together, but the way of working and the shared ambition to actually deliver something and leverage the assets of each organization to create something new was such an overriding factor that it meant that we could sort of take something to market, quite quickly and quite successfully. Now, is it the perfect operating product now? No, not at all, right? But over the course of time, as we sort of get success after success and we build on that, then what you'll start to see is an insurance company that actually starts to rate on factors based around risk management practice, right, and safety around the workplace, as opposed to simply just industry code and the number of employees you have. And I think that's that. If you're going to make change like that, if you're going to play more of a disruptive role, and you're going to do that via partnership, you need to have these things that really really let things click.
Fantastic, right? So listening, so Chris, if you can hear us, you might have to go and unmute. But from what Rita just mentioned, Insurtech can offer the right things to insurers. Insurers seek to have the same alignment with insurers, Insurtech firms. But of course, there's obviously some bottleneck because this chemistry isn't working to the extent that you would want it to work. So in your mind, what are the key bottlenecks that's kind of inhibiting this partnership?
Yeah, look, firstly, apologies for my pretty ordinary internet connection today. One of those days, I think, but and potentially I come and go. It's I guess if the question is around the bottlenecks around insurers providing excellent customer service that customers have reasonable expectations these days from. Look, I think fundamentally insurers are risk-centered, and the new wave of insurers, so to speak, are going to be customer-centered. I think fundamentally it's impossible to make that shift. So when I'm talking about kind of the new wave of insurers, I'm talking about big tech companies. Do we really think that the software eats the world thesis isn't going to play out in insurance? I mean, it might take a little bit longer in the same way that insurtechs have taken a bit longer than fintechs have to explode. But there's some pretty decent numbers being posted by the listed and soon to be listed US insurtechs. I guess fundamentally, what are the bottlenecks? I think it starts with that and trickles down. Rita spoke about her experience. Like a chatbot is not going to solve that. I'm sorry. The chatbot is a minor piece of technology. What actually has to undergo is that the organisation needs pretty much a large swathe of it to work for a competitor, and they need to bring in people who have a customer-centered mindset so that they don't write things like 10 days. We'll get back to you within 10 days while you're walk around your living room with a snorkel and mask on. I think what actually breaks down. We run an insurance business. We do every single bit of the value chain. We've got a couple hundred people, so we have a pretty close, tight knowledge of everything that has to happen. And every single person in the organisation needs to be wearing that customer hat. Even when it comes down to compliance people, etc. There's a whole way of communicating to customers. There's a whole way of proposing your products to customers from a product marketing perspective, but also from a clarity of the whole exercise and what the person who's ultimately taking or business is ultimately taking out, just communicating them in a certain way. It's incredibly hard for a business that's 100 years old to be able to do it. We've been doing it for 6 years, and extremely hard for us. James and safety culture are kind of embarking on that journey, and that's going to be a whole series of challenges. Thankfully, you've done it in the right structure with a separate JV where your partner is providing the customer service rather than the mothership. Mothership should be there to provide provide capital and underwriting support. The rest of it really needs to be left to, as I was saying, to technology companies and technology companies that are kind of seeking to actually solve this issue.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chris. I just want to move ahead because we have we're kind of running out of time as well. Attendees, please keep asking your questions. We'll get onto them as soon as we finish this section of the slide. So looking at the road ahead, right? So if I'm a CFO, I'm going to look at how can I get the maximum squeeze out of my investments. So James, your view on how do I maximize this ROI with partnerships?
Yeah, and actually sort of the risky element of it too. I mean, we sort of see them as the same side, different sides of the same coin, right? In the sense of a lot of what you do to maximize the ROI, you can also do in a way that minimizes the risk, right? A lot of the time, if you do it properly, and I think if I'm thinking about this, there's probably four or five things I think from an insurer's perspective that we can do, right? And I think the first one is when it comes down to your partnering framework and everything, the whole process around partnering, right? You've got to have discipline, and you've got to actually have, as sad as it sounds, you've actually got to have a discipline framework for how you partner effectively, right? So what do I mean by that? I mean, be clear sort of any design thinking approach or any sort of innovation approach. It's about sort of understanding sort of what your strategic rationale is or what your sort of problems are. It's about doing your research and understanding if partnership is actually, the best way to deliver on that, who to partner with. We see so many companies, and even sort of where we're in QBE now, a lot of the time we sort of see partnership opportunities come to us for assessment that are simply the first ones to sort of knock on the door, right? And sort of the inbound, right? As opposed to taking a much more strategic view around, well, what is it that you actually want to achieve? And is partnership the actual best way to do it, right? So sort of be very proactive in finding your partner. When you're assessing your partnerships, as I said sort of previously, for us, it's really around that sort of the strategic and cultural alignment, right? So make sure that whatever values or whatever framework you put around assessing what's important for you, you got to stick with that, right? You don't make shifts or changes that are sort of too far just because you think the tech is cool, right? So that's the first piece. I think the second piece, and this comes a little bit back to the Mitzi and sort of what Chris was saying before, is the more flexibility you can bring into that framework from an insurer's perspective, the more flexibility the insurer can have, the better, right? So in the MIDI example, we created the JV. So effectively, it's spun out of the mothership. The stack is built offline. The sort of the partnership agreement was sort of done outside of sort of the main group. We didn't necessarily have to align to all the bells and whistles around internal governance, right? So we could sort of take the ones that were most fit for purpose and apply them to this, rather than sort of putting safety culture through the same set of process that we might do if we were sort of scaling Salesforce through the entire global workforce. So it's really around having a fit for purpose process and that flexibility that said, well, the employees coming in can take equity in this startup, right? They need to be incentivized to be able to deliver on that value. So flexibility, I think, is really, really key. I think, as I said before, around the culture side, sort of transparency and openness is key. You've got to build trust, right? So if you're going to maximize the partnership, the opportunity, the potential of the partnership, you've got to have that collaboration. You've got to have that trust, right? So sort of what I said before. So really sort of being as open as you can. I think sort of the fourth one would be really around, from an insurer's perspective, you've got to bring your A team. Like, you're accessing so much talent and creativity, diversity of thought. If you're just going to put, people who just happen to not be doing much at the right time at that time, and give them 20% or 1 day a week to sort of work on this, it's not going to work, right? You need to find your best resources. You need to put them on at 100%. You need to incentivize them towards the success of the partnership, right? It's as simple as that. Unless they have a material skin in the game, they're not going to, the employees are not going to give everything, and you need them to give everything, because that's what the Insurtech's going to do, right? This is sort of their livelihood and their organization is dependent on it, right? And so, as I said before, I think the final bit is, if you're going to maximize ROI, have that long-term view, right? Have a vision and a strategy and be aligned on that, but start small, right? Start small and build on your successes. Some of the ROI that's sort of lost is where you just try to do too much too soon, and you just get to a point where if it doesn't work, it fails, right? And you don't want to do that. So I think if you sort of take a mixture of them on and effectively build a framework around that, I think that's certainly, from my experience, what I've seen where you can maximize the opportunity.
Brilliant. So James, I want to put you on a CEO, position, and get your views on what would you as an insurer do in the next 6 months and the next 1-2 years A quick answer.
Quick answer. Oh, wow. Right. Okay. I was a CEO. Okay. First thing I'll do would actually be to properly evaluate and set up a business to be outwardly focused on the customer and to create the right environment to actually experiment and iterate and empower those teams to deliver change. Too many times they're buried too far in the organization. There's too much broad transformation going on and it adds no value, right? It does over the longer term, but there's better ways of doing it, right? So shift that. Over the longer term, create the right environments, create the right processes, empower those people and make them accountable to deliver change, and incentivize the whole organization to adopt this, to partner effectively, right? And to explore this, to come up with ideas and to be actively involved in this, right? And those who demonstrate the right mindset and who have the right sort of that growth ambition, who can think differently, put them in the roles where they can make change.
Brilliant. So Rita, coming back to you, after having heard points of view from Chris and James, what do you think the future of partnership looks like?
Yeah, and look, there is just so much content. I feel like we're just scratching the surface here tonight. Even when you're talking about, the things that can go wrong with partnerships, there's just so many that you can go into, and if you don't have the foundations right. But in terms of the future of partnerships, I think, from the research that we have done, and certainly the report that we delivered on the Australian ecosystem together with EY a few months ago, the impression is certainly that partnerships are going to become mainstream in the next 3 to 5 years between insurtechs and insurers. So that's, I guess, the first thing. The second thing is that partnership models are likely to change, and there's going to be a lot of other options in terms of the way that insurers, brokers and insurtechs work together. So that could be things like insurtechs and insurtechs coming together to provide solutions to clients. It could be a whole lot more M&A happening in the space. It could be completely different licensing arrangements, insurers looking to work with tech players to then provide solutions, and the sky's the limit. And certainly I think, and Chris might be able to comment on this, but I think where consumers will buy insurance from will look a little bit different, and the platforms that they visit to buy insurance from will be a little bit different in the future. So there will likely be a lot more partnerships with non-traditional insurance players to then deliver insurance. And probably the last one, or actually the second last one, I've probably got two more. The second last one is more around the fact that these partnerships will likely become more global than we have currently seen. So, currently, if you look at a lot of the partnerships that are occurring, most of them are within regions. So insurtechs and incumbents working together within regions, that's not across the board, but predominantly that's what we have seen. Most insurtechs are building their solutions to be cross-border and to be global, and I think the uptake of that will likely become more evident in the next sort of 3 years or so that partnerships will be a lot more cross-border. And then the last one is, and it feeds off probably a lot of the comments that James was making around ROI. I'll be really interested to see how success is measured in the future between insurers or incumbents and insurtechs, using not necessarily just traditional measures of measuring ROI or measuring success. I think there's a whole lot of other considerations that come into play when you're building a successful partnership like that, and looking to the future, not looking to make money in the very, very short term.
Brilliant. So coming back to Chris, the word on the street is you have some really juicy case studies, examples for us to share where partnerships have really worked. Would love to hear one from you.
Yeah, if you're hoping to hear a broad rundown on the state of insurtech partnerships with insurers across the globe, then you probably come to the wrong guy, but I can probably talk about a few things from our own experience. Probably a good one is
Have we lost him? Ouch. Okay, Chris, I think we lost you. We can't hear you. All right. Unfortunately, I think we lost Chris. What we can do is one of you can share. James, one I try and coax you into sharing one. You may have to unmute.
Yeah, again, the technology guy fails with the technology. Yeah, good case studies where a partnership has shown to work. Well, I've actually got, yeah, so well, this isn't sort of, I might just flip this actually, because we were working on one quite recently that didn't work. And I know we're sort of talking about, a couple of really sort of, I guess, prominent case studies, and I used the MITI one earlier. I honestly think from our perspective, that's one that came together, at the right time, and in a previous. Actually, no, I'll backtrack that. I'll go one that has worked. So previously in my last role at IAG, we obviously made quite a few investments in the likes of sort of Airtasker, and one of those that we looked at was UpGuard, right? And UpGuard are a US cybersecurity company, and really what we wanted to do with them, or the ideas that we had around working with them, was to establish sort of a cyber insurance proposition for the SME space, and they hadn't developed that. And a key area or a key rationale for us investing in UpGuard at the time was for us to build that over time and deliver that. And sort of cutting long story short, because I know Chris is back now, effectively what we've managed to do there is over the course of, and it took sort of 3 years, right? 3 years of figuring this out and sort of ups and overs. Effectively, we're about to roll out, a proposition, digital first, delivered through brokers, through sort of the Southeast Asian market intermediaries in that view. And that was one where they had no experience of insurance. It came in fresh. They worked together over the longer term. Both teams sort of contributed in a very customer sort of first way. So very sort of HCD based, and really sort of built that up over time to the extent where we then moved away from the Australian market into Southeast Asia because the opportunity was so much better up there. So that's sort of one good example, putting me on the spot. But now hopefully Chris is back and he can give us some more from the coverage things.
Chris, what I can do is, I might move to Q&A, and I might give you the first question, right? So the question we have from Bento is, you have, as an organization, as an insurer, you have a few options. You can either build something in-house, or you can go partner with an Insurtech firm who has all these offerings, right? So which one would you advocate, one between the other?
Quick answer on that. Insurers shouldn't build any tech. That's my firm view. So obviously you go to the Insurtech industry who are doing things a lot better. They may not be doing things at scale, but there's a few out there that are. I was going to say that with the case study question from earlier, just quickly, we have a partnership with Swiss Re and Insure QuickBooks and a specialty insurer from California for which has gone really well. So that just got announced last month. It's a good example of what I was saying earlier about the role of insurers. I think going forward in the software eats the world thesis that we're firmly behind, the insurer is providing financial, the capital, right? So we firmly believe that that's the right model. We do every single bit of the customer service. We've built all the tech. We hit their ratings engine from an API, but our APIs are the ones that are powering the site, powering the customer experience. That's an example. Typically, our sort of partnerships are direct with what I was talking about earlier. The future generation of insurers. People like Skyscanner, QuickBooks, Intuit, eBay, Wayfair. There's dozens of others. So our partnership model is really strategic partnerships with those. There was another question about how do you ensure ROI? Do less partnerships, right? So you've got to be extremely selective, which was what James was saying. A business idea is not worth anything. That what's worth partnering with is like a proven case. And the safety culture one's a good one from James. There's lots of things you can do as an insurer, but I really think that stepping away from it and finding partners that can bring the volume is really everything that matters.
Brilliant, right? So there's one question which is quite interesting, which is, other than sales and policy servicing and claims, what are the other areas where insurtechs are partnering with insurers, right? So Rita, do you answer that?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I alluded to it before. There is an absolute plethora of insurtech solutions out there across every element of the insurance value chain and trying to solve every problem in the insurance value chain. So in addition to those ones that were mentioned in the question, I think I talked about whole new products to market, and that will continue to change as customer expectation changes, but also the way we live our lives change, the types of jobs that we engage in changes as well. So, I guess one of the benefits of a big bulky insurer being able to work with a more nimble insurtech is that they can very quickly, iterate what they're doing to provide those new propositions. The other area, which I think was not mentioned, is also around how data is used in the business and analysed in the business, underwriting processes, and using brand new tools to actually underwrite in a more effective and efficient way as well, that requires less people to actually do the underwriting. What have I missed? Risk mitigation solutions or solutions that are looking at things like, as an example, weather events and preparing insured individuals well before a weather event occurs and giving them advice as to what to do to try and minimise the actual claims that eventuate. And obviously this is a big thing in Australia because we have significant weather events, particularly in certain areas of the country. So I guess that's a few examples, but I think, as I mentioned, probably any of the major problems that you would be aware of in the insurance space, there'd be some sort of solution either being developed or currently in existence.
Yeah,
Aaron,
can I just add to that? One of the things that's really interesting is even in those areas, what we're starting to see now, and I've noticed this obviously more being in QBE, is the number of insurtechs that are now starting to tackle, very, very complex problems, particularly in commercial lines. So where we originally sorted out as the question was around, distribution, sales, making the claims process a little easier. We're now starting to see, in fairly niche portfolio areas too, like marine and other areas like that, where insurtechs are actually starting to have a look at whether it's sort of new forms of data into the underwriting decision, as Rita was saying, process automation and straight through processing. But even if you have a look at, providing a digital-only syndicate to sit, to transfer through Lloyd or to execute through Lloyd's of London, right? I mean, these are markets that are inherently complex, have a significant number of stakeholders involved in every transaction. And we're now starting to see insurtechs and insurers too start to play in and take on these challenges that sort of 3 or 4 years ago, were just deemed too difficult. And I think that's what's most exciting about the next 5 years plus, is that if we start to get traction with some of these areas, then we're really going to see some meaningful sort of tangible value come out. And as we've been talking about, if insurers, to Chris's point, insurers can't build this and should not build this themselves. They, even if they are building it in their own brand, it should be through partnership and in collaboration, right? And I completely agree with that. So, that in itself presents so many opportunities, in the future.
Brilliant. So I'm gonna get to the key takeaways section of our webinar, right? So let's start with Chris. If we have a lot of C-level executives, wannabe entrepreneurs on our webinar, what is one of the key takeaways you'd like to share with them?
Do you mean like advice?
Advice,
Or
yes.
today? Okay.
I can take that, go back to my firm, tell my team, guys, let's do this today.
Yeah, good question. So for the entrepreneurs, then I think it's a clear case of go ahead and do it. You'd be amazed with some of the outcomes you can get if you've experienced the problems yourself sitting in large insurance organization. Then you're not the only one. That's how we started Cover Genius, right? So we had an online travel agency. We were dealing with big traditional insurers to try and get them to give us policies that we could sell to the global audience. And of course, if we wanted to sell to French people, we had to go and speak to Pierre in Paris. And if we had to, we had to go and do a deal with Henry in London to get coverage. And it's just impossible. And there was also no platform for the delivery. So I guess, my point there is if you're experiencing it, then everyone's experiencing it. And you should be the one who goes and solves it. That's the best piece of advice I can give to people that want to go out there and do that. If you're on the insurance side, look, my views may be controversial, but we deal with we have partnerships with dozens of insurers as well who are providing capacity for us all around the world and coming up with really innovative solutions. It really helps, to James's point, you've got to have the right people on it. But leaning into what the discussion is, seeing actual numbers rather than kind of forecast numbers, and that helps make a decision. And people, companies like us who are utilising the capacity you've got, we're partners. It's hard to. It's not an overly liquid market. Going and getting capacity. So, leverage that. That's your strength. Companies that are coming to you want something from you, and you get to bake in your target loss ratios. You play the contracts properly, and you'll get a really good outcome. But walking away from pretty good opportunities, which there's all sorts of organisational breakdown that's caused by it, and sometimes it's just change of strategy. I mean, that happens to us. But if someone's knocking on your door with a good opportunity and you can't do it, then just thank them for the coffee, beer, or lunch, and make it a quick end to the speed date, because the insurtechs are really in a hurry.
Brilliant. All right, I'm gonna march through some really good insights, guys. Before we end, I just want to give you a prelude to next week's session. We'll be talking about why your underwriters need AI to automate things, do things better. So make sure you join us. We will for sure have an interesting discussion. Right. For today's webinar, we thank everyone for joining. James, Rita, Chris, thanks for making time. We had a great discussion, and hopefully you'll join us soon. Right. So for everyone else, if you see a survey, please fill it up. That way we'll know what we did well, what we did not do well, and how can we improve things. Thank you so much for joining. See you next week. Bye.